have any members of the public in attendance? No, not even our usual one. I think that was her swan song. She probably has something to do.
I think he or she could be angry at me. I'm just kidding.
Maybe staying on a Zoom call till 9:30 or 10 at night didn't help.
Yeah.
So, do we want to just review the couple of things we did last night? First of all, put a button in the issue that we were talking about. Are we okay then with the place we were ending in terms of the existing stuff? We'll say it's good for a year, and then you guys figure it out. The charter no longer continues to authorize it. Is that all right?
Yeah, I am. I'm all for that. Just to let it pass.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, in retrospect, I don't like it, but I don't care so much that I want to extend our conversation by a minute on it, unless somebody else wants to. Okay, excellent. Where to next? So that's the saving clause language.
Yep. So I just put them side by side. So do you want to keep in this second paragraph that you put in last night? Or are we going to take it out? Just say there shall exist, they're established by the charter or in accordance with general statutes. And then the saving clause says, and the Board of Selectmen has a year to get them established.
Yeah, so we'll just leave it like that. Where is the savings clause?
It's at the very end. It's like 11.1 or something. It's the very end of the charter.
Why don't we put it here?
Okay.
Don't you think? I mean, if someone's going to want to know.
Yep. No, I agree. And obviously, if it were here last night, we would have not had such a lengthy conversation, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. We're a committee of the whole.
Okay. The other thing I want to look at side by side is 4.1.4K and 10.1.3. And this is what I had talked about at the very end of your meeting last night. This is the emergency powers that we had changed with the town attorney. And I just want to make sure everyone is okay with the changes that the attorney had suggested.
Why don't we give it a second?
Yeah.
4.14K. So we should be looking on the right-hand side. That's what you're calling our attention to.
4.1.4K is on the right and 10.1.3 is on the left. And I just, these kind of run in conjunction with one another. So I wanted you to see them side by side.
Shh, big fella. You'll have to excuse me for a minute. Somebody.
So the big change, just while you guys are reading this, the big change in 10.1.3 is we had kind of given a bunch of detail in 10.1.3 about what the first selectman could do. And the town attorneys basically said, what are you trying to solve by this statute gives the first selectman the authority to do what needs to do for the efficient running of business during a state of emergency. So they actually suggested not putting any of that in the charter. That's the big change in 10.1.3.
Could you say again why that clarification and explicitly stating it's a bad idea?
Basically, what the town
is a bad idea.
So the town attorney said it really isn't necessary for the charter because it's state statute gives the first selectman that authority. And basically, if state statute changes and gives them different types of authority, but our charter is explicit to what the authority is now, then our charter would supersede. If our charter is more restrictive, it supersedes the state. So at some point, we may be in conflict with what the state says by putting it in the charter, but also in general, I think they felt it just wasn't necessary. If the state gives them the authority, we don't need to put it in the charter. The state's already done it.
So this is, Lauren, you're talking about crossing out the local state of emergency?
Yeah, under 10.1.3, all of this strikeout that we did.
I'm actually fine with that because the way I look at this entire section, it's better than when we got it. So even if you take that out and the rest is under state statute, it's more, it's clearer than what we started out with.
Yeah, and you guys did input the stuff that's in purple here. I mean, this is all things that you added into the charter that I think help clarify the balance of the role between the board versus the first selectman. And I think give a little better timeline to what a state of emergency is, as like Joe was saying, as opposed to what was in the current charter.
Lauren, may I ask a question? So state statute, does it say if a town actually establishes its own state of emergency outside of the state, like it was just a hyper local thing, it actually delineates what powers are there? Or does it delineate what powers if there's a whole state of emergency and how each state first select person or mayor or anything like that can operate?
Don't quote me on the exact language, but it's something along the lines of under a local state of emergency, which would be a town state of emergency.
Okay.
The first select, this town CEO is authorized to, and basically it says like authorized to undertake necessary actions for the efficient running of government.
Okay.
Yeah, that was part of the reason that we added, the wording, right? Was so if there was something local to Madison, but if that's covered under the state statute, I mean, in other sections, we've just referenced the state statute. So if that's indeed what the state statute says, then yeah, I'm fine with moving it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that's consistent. We've largely been trying to avoid that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the state statute makes it clear that you have these powers, even if it's under a local state declaration of emergency. It doesn't have to be under a state declaration.
According to the town attorneys, it's either or. I will go and make sure of that
Yeah, it'd be great.
before we submit this final. So after you guys are done meeting today, I have another Zoom from 10 to 11, and then I'm going to spend the rest of this afternoon just going line by line through your red line and your final draft. And then I will send those out to you guys if you could try to look them over tonight if there's anything glaring before we have to submit this to the town clerk tomorrow at noon.
So I think at the end of this meeting, we should vote to recommend this charter unless subject to reviewing any any red lines by consensus electronically. The only problem with that, Lauren, would be if there's something really substantive, then we're not doing corrections. Then
we have to
muster.
Yeah.
So that would be the only issue. So are you guys okay with that process?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
And this could also be, it could be something that you say to the Board of Selectmen. We wanted to do this in 10.1.3. The town, the attorneys for the charter recommended not putting this in the charter, but you may want to have your attorney review if it should be put back in.
And actually, by the way, now that you've said that, to the extent if you uncover anything particularly wild, we've still recommended this charter, but when we sit in front of the BOS, we'd say, since that, we continued some review and have
exactly
some suggestions.
Exactly.
And that way we'll do it within meeting.
Yep.
Okay. So then it strikes me then looking at these corrections, I don't know. I think this is longer than started and shorter than we started out with, but it still looks good to me. Is it all right with everyone as corrected?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Where should we look next, Lauren? Do we want to go back to the world of the Board of Finance policies? Did we do that correctly? Or do you have somewhere else you want to direct us?
No, I think we can go there quickly. I do think you guys came to a consensus last night. This is 6.4. We had initially taken out item B, which was the enactment of regulations. Last night we went back in, we put it back in, but we changed it to create, modify, and implement policies that guide the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
Okay.
What, by the way, just to give up my own, concern on regulations, the prior version were not necessarily guiding the Board of Finance. They were guiding anyone they wanted.
Yes.
Right.
So-
That was
so
the problem.
Internal policies, like Fillmore was talking about, is the nice and useful part. The language could have subsumed the town. So this looks fine. If we want to adopt policies, any board can do that. And it also says to guide, not to bind, which is good.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that, and I think it addresses Fillmore's point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The other thing I wanted just to talk about, which we did not talk about last night, but it was input by the attorneys is the preamble. We had talked back and forth throughout this process about changing the name, changing the Board of Selectmen, not to a non-gendered type of name. The the legislature is approving a bill, I think hopefully this week, to create a working group to study potential nomenclature for elected executive boards. So until that is done and they have what they're actually going to recommend that the boards be called, we are obviously not going to put that in the charter, but we did ask the attorney to draft some language for the preamble that just gave the Board of Selectmen the opportunity to change their name when the state catches up to it.
Did they give a reason for a 2/3 vote?
I think that's just standard. It's a simple majority. But you guys can make this 4. You can make it a super majority vote if you wanted to, and make it four members of the board have to vote to change the name.
I don't see why a 2/3 vote would be needed.
That's a majority. It's a 5-person board.
That's a majority? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
5
right.
people.
Okay.
I know you're the scientist here, Bob. I don't
Wait
want
a
to
second.
in your area.
2/3 isn't 3/5, 60%?
Yeah, so it would be 4 out of the out of 5.
Right. So I think the 2/3 vote's got to go.
It's confusing.
Actually,
You shouldn't have to have a super majority to.
I disagree in the sense that if I'm elected to a position and I ran as a selectman and I don't like what people are coming up with next, I think you kind of need 4 of the members to say, okay. You know what I mean? Like that feels, you're changing what their title is. You know, I would almost think unanimous might be okay, but 4 sounds all right to me. You know, it's changing. You know,
You didn't have a choice of running for a different name. If you find it offensive, I mean, we're really. I'm not so clear why we want to build in a status quo bias on the nomenclature.
It's not the nomenclature, it's whatever they select next. You know, I agree with you on the idea of changing it. It's just, there might be several options. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're bad.
Well, I just disagree. I think that we shouldn't build in a status quo bias here. We don't have 4 votes required for ordinances and all kinds of stuff. So why for this would you want 4?
Well, what does everybody think?
Well, I think what this is really, really what this is doing is effectively saying the state's gonna, kind of come up with a solution. I think this paragraph just gives an out for towns to just revise the charter to change the names instead of having to go through the whole charter review process again.
Oh, David, I'm not opposed to the paragraph. I'm opposed to requiring 4 votes rather than a simple majority.
Oh,
I determined in the last minute that I don't care. So if you'd like to go with 3, I'm perfectly happy with 3. If you guys want to go with 4, because as I'm thinking about, we're talking about one person,
we do go with 4 to rescind the declaration of emergency. So it's not inconsistent with other places in the charter where we've asked for 4 out of 5 members.
Okay. No,
The only reason I like 4 is I think if the board's going to select one of what I assume are options of names, it'd be nice if they had most of the board going along and saying, okay, it's more likely to stick.
I also hate the idea that it could be split down party lines 3-2 and have a different political ramification.
Yeah, that's
a good point, Lauren.
That's a really good point, Lauren.
yeah. And then, X number of years later, it's 3-2 the other way. And then X number of years later, it goes back and forth. That's not,
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm late, guys. I had an office issue.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We'll go.
I still don't like the status quo bias, but go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you may end up with less. Lauren's point's a good one. You may end up with less status quo bias if it doesn't flip around all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. Excellent. Joan, we accepted the attorney's suggestions on emergency powers, which is some more language, but removed some things that were duplicative with state statute. We went through and the issue we were talking about last time, as you probably saw from Lauren's email, we actually already solved. So our big solution was to move the saving language right underneath that language. So the next person reading the charter doesn't do what we did last night and not see that those are connected, because that was down at section 11.
Mhm.
And then we eliminated the Board of Finance. And aside from that, we're fine. Well, we reviewed the you weren't here. So we went
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah.
woo, run wild. So no, what we did do is we went through and we reviewed the section where we added in the policies to guide the finance to address one of the issues that Fillmore brought up.
Right. Yep, sorry
And
about
we just did this one. And is there, the only other thing I thought maybe we would go back to that first selectman definition, just because it's a really important paragraph. We did it on the fly. Is there anything else you want us to see beforehand?
Can I just see what we removed on the emergency stuff? Because I think that, did we
Really
remove it
quick?
all?
No. We
Okay.
removed a significant chunk where we had spec'd out what happens under time of local emergency, and the feedback was that's already covered by state statute. Don't do that, because the authorization under state statute can change.
The
And-
only other thing before we go to that section, Joe, just
Yes.
8.1. In the email I had sent last night, I just said I did think we should probably relook at the first paragraph. So where we put in established by charter versus established by ordinance, and I just suggested that maybe instead of saying that, we should say structured or regulated by ordinance here.
Mhm.
Because then
Yeah.
we're not talking about establishment. Establishment stays in 9.3. It's established by town meeting. So are you guys okay with changing it here?
Yeah, can
Yes.
you put, what do you think of existing by ordinance?
Perfect.
Because
And then we have the clause that gives them a year.
I think you should push that out to 2, to tell you the
Yeah.
truth. Well, there's so many of them right now. Do you know what I mean? That they really, there's a lot of boards and commissions that I think they want to look at, and also allow those boards and commissions to give feedback, and that will take time.
Yes,
Yep.
As Joe used to tell me, it's not necessarily a jaunt, it's a little bit of a slog every now and then. This, to me, it has the remnants of being a slog for that many that many groups of people trying to get together and help form what is going to be in the future.
I think it needs to be 2 years.
Yep.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
So that should tell you, for you guys that haven't sat on the boards, you should go run for them. They are fun. We remember them.
Yes, Joe and I used to sit next to each other, and during budget season, that was always a lot of fun. There would be notes sent back and forth, like, do we really want to just spend $10? It was like something silly that,
Oh,
are we
yeah.
really having this discussion for $1,000 item? You know what I mean?
All the stories that you guys were reminiscing about for the last year and a half are very enticing to join boards.
The reality is I'm a miserable human being during budget season, or I used to be. I didn't like the process. I was not my highest and best self, and Joan was kind enough to listen to my grousing and snark.
Actually, so I did ask to volunteer for the Economic Development Commission. So if anybody has experience with that, I would love to hear what it
Oh,
was
Mark,
like.
Mark does. He sat on it
Oh,
for
really?
a long time.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
do too, but it has changed quite a bit since I was on. Because
Okay.
I was on that before I was on the Board of Selectmen, and it wasn't as active as it is now.
Okay. I'll still reach out though. I'd love to hear your side.
That is a total gateway drug to town service. I will tell you though that the one of the things I would highly recommend is, attaching yourself to the zoners, because that connection, the interesting part of economic development rises and falls in a development cycle, and getting a little bit of zoner attachment, and understanding what they're up to will help. Well, where to next, Lauren? Oh, so here's the
Yep, so
language we
here's
were just talking about,
10.1.3.
Joan. So you need to see them side by side.
Oh, yeah, and I can't even.
You can't see
read.
it?
I can't see it. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Let me see if I can get a little bit. So the right is what we're putting in, or the left?
Well, let's start on what's on the screen.
Yeah.
So these are the things, the 10.1.3, and Lauren, you'd stop me if I'm overdoing it, are removing of just a couple of pieces. Some things we did, some things they suggested, but the big change is the under local declaration of emergency, zotzing that entirely because it's duplicative with a state statute.
Okay.
And so we'd be doing that terrible thing of defining something in the charter that's actually moving.
Moving. Okay. Yep. Okay.
And
All right.
Lauren did her best to recount the statute, and it's pretty close.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Welcome. And then the other thing, Joan, that we talked about when you guys vote today to approve your draft is Joan just had suggested that if anything comes up between now and when it gets sent to the Board of Selectmen, when we present it on the 10th to the Board of Selectmen meeting, we can say, here's our draft. But, we also think that the board should spend time reviewing XYZ section as we've come to believe, such and such changes might be needed.
Yeah, review subsequent to our recommendation of this charter has some additions. And if we all agree on that as a suggestion to them, well, Lauren, you can just even put it in the draft they have.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'll be the one bringing this to them and their process and their, town attorney. So if anything does come up, I'm the middleman for that too. So I can relay, the thoughts of this committee.
Though, if you'll keep an eye on your emails in the late afternoon, if Lauren has changes and we get them, it would be really nice just to get a reply all that says, or a reply to Lauren, rather, not a reply all, reply to Lauren and me, actually, that says yes. And that way we can just do that we have electronic consensus of the board. It's not a meeting per se, but it's, and the only difference, Joan, is that I think that's perfectly fine for cleanup stuff. If we get something substantive, then I'd rather just do the recommendation because we should meet for anything of substance. But for cleanup items, I think that's perfectly okay.
And are we going to do suggestions on questions or no?
You can, then we should talk about that now.
Yeah, I have no intention of doing it after this meeting because we're going to vote. And
Right.
Once we vote, we move on.
Right.
That's how. So we got.
Did we have? I thought we had suggestion of breakout questions in one conversation or 1 minute. I can't remember.
Oh, I'm
I know.
sorry. I didn't hear you say breakout questions. I thought you said suggestions on the charter language.
No.
No.
The breakout questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can also talk about that before the Board of Selectmen meeting when we go. I mean, I think clearly the number of the selectmen terms, that has to be one.
Yep.
The Board of Finance membership might be one. I don't know if that's really that hot button an issue, but from my perspective, I would take, unless there's a single item you think that we changed that will be hot button-y that's not in there, I wouldn't want the charter to collapse over the term of the first selectman. The town will be just fine and better if this charter passes with the shorter term. I think it should be longer, but.
And yeah, that's the question. Do we break out the Board of Finance piece too? I have a tendency to think that's not as big of an issue because you're just going from 6 to 7. It's not.
Unless they get, rampaging hordes of people with signs at a selectman meeting, I think it's kind of a boring suggestion. You know what I mean?
It's one of the boring.
People will be like, oh, that's even. That's a little weird.
Yeah.
And even Fillmore last night had the I thought we did it for a reason, and no.
We really didn't.
Like most things, it's just laziness. We didn't think about it, and for decades. Anyone else have thoughts on issues that you think might be, there's no science to this, it's art. Anything that you think might be controversial that we've done that should be called out?
It's interesting on the symbolic side versus the non-symbolic. I think one of the reasons at least when I was interviewed for this job, that came across was concern that the Board of Finance needed to, quote, stay in its lane. That there were concerns by more than one person very active that the Board of Finance wanted to be a second Board of Selectmen, and to have a process where to look at general policies, not to that its lane is finance, finance, and finance, not everything. So, and I think we've done that by clarifying that. You know, it may not stick out in something that's easy to remember symbolically, but we have clarified it, which I think is a really nice improvement. But that's the controversial. But I don't know if it sticks out as controversial.
I don't necessarily think it's that controversial to most voters. It may be controversial to people who've served or are serving on the Board of Finance. But I think when we said, I think we went from regulation to policy, I think it was like, oh, okay, because the only regulatory quote unquote board is Board of Selectmen with the town meeting vote of approval or town hearing kind of thing. So, you know, to me, if the Board of Finance wants to have a regulation, they should be presenting it to the Board of Selectmen to present to a town meeting.
No, I think when I think about it, I think that's what I meant by the symbolic things. You articulated it much better than I had, that it's too inside baseball.
Well, I also think, you know, ultimately we had a robust discussion, series of them, about who does the last vote on the budget. And ultimately we left that process the same. And that was also the feedback we got. We brought in the chairs. So that gives the Board of Finance a lot of their same power. On the other hand, we also did change the budget cycle. And again, that's an inside baseball thing in terms of giving more leeway and less structured. And you'd be surprised, as a pure political matter, that rebalances a lot, because when you're on this weird, like, it has to be done, you have to go, you know, and everyone's on this artificial cycle, it puts the process in charge. I mean, it may come to the same thing. We'll see how it plays out over the years, because ultimately it's got to get done. But the fact that there's more leeway for discussion per year, I think is actually just good for town government. You know, more than being a hassle for us. I think it's also important for the discussion, and I think that'll help too.
Yeah, because how do you break that out as a question? I don't think that there is a capability, but it is in there if people do a review.
The only other thing I can think that they Board of Selectmen may choose to do, I mean, look, if they want to on their own volition, they can put the zoning commission question up. You know, there's nothing about us not recommending it that stops them from putting it in. I still remain opposed to that for a lot of reasons, and I think that our panel was, but you know, it's not with it not being in there. To my mind, doesn't defeat the charter, because if you wanted to, you could still have a vote and bring a group up. And there was a referendum on this that failed some years ago. I know Joe Mako was talking about a prior meeting where they tried to do it, but then there was a petition, a referendum, a full vote, and it didn't pass.
Right. It was, no, it's okay.
What specific issues prevented the last charter review from being passed? Because I know that there was some kind of you know, there was something
there were two issues. One issue was in an attempt to do some lane creation. There was one where if the Board of Selectmen wants to do, you know, do a special appropriation or a large sum, and the Board of Finance says no, the Board of Selectmen can go to a town meeting. If the quorum if they could not get a quorum, then the Board of Finance's decision stayed. If they had a quorum, whatever the vote on the quorum became. So that was one thing that was fairly controversial. And then at the time, it seems so crazy, but it was called extended town meetings, because you would have people come to a town meeting. And if they couldn't make the town meeting would be on video, and it's like, how do we get that done? And, this is prior to all the technology we have now. And there would be 4 days where you could go to the town clerk's office, and the meeting would be online at the website. You could view it, and then you could go in and vote at the town clerk's office, your vote for what was going on in the town meeting. And those two pieces were pretty, at the time, it was voted on unanimously by the charter. And then when it came back to the Board of Selectmen, an entire group of individuals said, oh, well, we voted for it, but we don't agree with it. And so it became a huge political football.
So neither of those issues would, I guess my question was, if there was something specific last time that we should make a breakout question this time. So it sounds like the answer is no.
Yeah, I don't see any of these. The most controversial is the 4-year term, and I don't think most people think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think most people think, why are they running again 2 years later?
I do think I think it was a good thing to put the policies versus regulations back in,
Yes.
because there is a sensitivity that if the Board of Finance doesn't, and that particular Board of Finance back then was so well run that so many people were so inspired. No, I was chair. But that there's a sense that the Board of Finance, if it's not riding herd on the process, will be a free spending town. The problem with that is there's all that whole town meeting stuff we talked about.
Right.
But still, I think the being sensitive to the fact that the town in general likes it the way it is, in to the extent that as they understand it, as they appreciate it from the outside. So going through and putting the changes we put in, and frankly, maybe even putting an odd number vote might not be the worst thing. Might actually help with that impression, because adding extra members. So I think
the other thing is, when the Board of Finance was first created, I don't believe we had a director of finance. That was a professional person running the entire kind of operation within the town. So I think that, and there was, because it was, once again, it was years ago, smaller town. And at the time, it was the Board of Selectmen that kind of ran the whole budgetary show. And I think this was established for that check and balance kind of thing. So.
So so the 4-year terms, maybe the 7 members. I don't, Lauren, you get to listen to everyone coming in and out of that office. Anything else within the structure that you think we should consider for vote?
No, I think in the beginning of the process, I thought that you guys would have some more things that we would be doing that people would think were too different or too much change. But I really think most of the changes that you've made to this charter have been very, just middle of the road, what's best for the town, reasonable changes. So I don't really see anything else that jumps out as a potential to get a groundswell of negative, thoughts behind it.
Can we revisit the language of the first selectman language, the stuff we made the change to, just because that's the authorization lead officer. Then I kind of want us to take a not sleepy-eyed view of it just one last time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I was thinking about? What's the job, whatever it is, committee, job evaluation committee? Where is that?
The job evaluation committee right now is in the charter, but it is one of the commissions that we said we are going to strike out of section 8.1.
Good.
So it would be a committee that the Board of Selectmen would now have 2 years to establish a charge and ordinance. That's where that would go. So the Board of Selectmen could definitely decide if they want to sunset that committee. And piggybacking on what Joan just said about the Board of Finance and the Finance Director, is the Job Evaluation Committee was also created when we did not have a professional HR director. So that was something that the town needed at the time because we didn't have human resources. But the town has since gone in the direction of having a very strong human resources director.
Yeah, so I think good. I would like to leave it to the Board of Selectmen to think whether or
Yes.
not we need that role any longer.
Right. I like the fact that we just took only the committees and commissions from state statute that are really required. And I think we threw in conservation as well. And I think that those are things that are proper.
Yeah. Okay, I don't have any problem with what's on the screen. Is it all right with everybody?
No, I think it's great. I like how how we broke it out last night. So I think it's great.
Yeah,
In
Okay.
here.
Yeah, I'm good.
look at that, public hearing, actually working with comments from the public. Go figure.
Yeah.
Yay, democracy. All right. Are we good to, Lauren, before I say that, is there anything else you want us to look at?
No, that was my list.
So if that case, I'd like to motion that we recommend this charter to the Board of Selectmen and deliver it to the town clerk. I think that's the right format, subject to any minor additions that we may recommend, subject to subsequent, forget it. We'll just recommend it to the Board of Selectmen and the town clerk. That's the recommendation.
Right.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Right, got that from Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? No, we want to keep talking.
Yeah,
All right.
you're trying to end this
Good
relationship,
work, Joe.
Joe.
I know.
hopefully I'll send out a notice sometime in the summer for a barbecue and fire at the fire pit. for
Oh,
everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we absolutely need to do that. That'd be nice. Actually, to be honest, for most of you, I've never actually been in the room with you. You know, only Joan and Lauren, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it would be nice.
I've been in a room with Matt and I was surprised
Yeah.
because all we see is the neck of, and I didn't know that the guy was a bodybuilder.
Yeah, I'm 7'1", by the way.
And
No,
Rob,
we-
you're
we
tall.
really-
I was surprised at how tall you are.
We were in the Verizon store. We went into. So wait a second, I've seen that guy's face. The bodybuilder, anyway. It's just,
Some of my students, when we first were going back, I said, I'm really worried about it. I said, why? He goes, well, a woman was talking to me. She goes, I don't know how tall anyone is. I said, well, yeah. She goes, well, there's no way to tell. She goes, I'm really tall for a woman and I tend to judge people by height. That's how I remember people. I think when you're very tall that you that's one of the things you gauge. And like from behind, how am I going to spot anybody? It's like, I never thought of that. It was exactly right.
Same thing when you're kind of short too, by the way.
Yeah. It's a thing we don't think about. We judge people by their presence, as opposed to just their lovely smile and sonorous voices, as enhanced by Zoom.
Okay, well, I got somebody asking to get me back on for 9:45.
I've got to get some work done today. guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, good job.
Sorry, I was
everyone.
late.
Job.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Thank you,
you.
Lauren.
Thanks, Joe.
again.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.